The storm came without warning, a black wall rolling over the plains, swallowing the sun in a breath. Luke Callahan urged his horse forward through the roaring wind, squinting against the stinging rain that lashed at his face. The range stretched endlessly before him, mud, sagebrush, and scattered cattle still lost from the last drive. But something ahead caught his eye. Through the blur of dust and rain, a shape lay crumpled near the old fence line, motionless. He reined in hard, heart pounding, and swung down from the saddle. At first he thought it was a blanket or an abandoned sack caught in the wind. But when lightning split the sky, he saw the truth. It was a woman. Her dress was torn, soaked through with mud, her arms bound cruelly behind her back with coarse rope that had cut deep into her skin. She was barely conscious, lips moving soundlessly as he knelt beside her. Her face was young, delicate even under the bruises, her hair matted and tangled with dirt. "Ma'am," Luke said, voice low and steady. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes flickered open, green and glassy. She tried to move away, but she was too weak. Her voice was a rasp barely carried by the wind. "Don't touch me, please." He hesitated, lowering his hands, the rain pouring down harder between them. "You're hurt," he said. "Let me help." She swallowed, a tremor running through her. "I'm ruined," she whispered, as if saying it aloud was worse than dying. The words hit him harder than the storm itself. He didn't know what she meant, not yet, but there was enough pain in her tone to silence any question. He drew his knife and cut the ropes. The fibers snapped, and her wrists fell free, red and raw from the strain. She winced, but didn't cry out. "You ain't ruined," Luke muttered, more to himself than her, as he slipped his coat from his shoulders and wrapped it around her trembling frame. "You're just cold and you need warmth." Her body shivered beneath the heavy fabric. She was drenched through, barely breathing, her lips pale. When he tried to lift her, she fought weakly, her hands pressing against his chest. "No, don't, leave me here. It's better this way." Luke shook his head, rain running off the brim of his hat. "Not a chance." He scooped her into his arms, ignoring the mud that clung to both of them. She weighed almost nothing. He mounted his horse, holding her against him as the animal braced against the wind. The ride back to the ranch was brutal. The path was slick, the rain unrelenting, but he kept one arm tight around her, shielding her from the worst of the storm. Every now and then she murmured something, a name maybe, or a prayer, but most of her words were lost to the thunder. He only caught one phrase clearly, repeated like a plea: "I'm ruined." When at last the dim glow of his cabin appeared through the rain, Luke urged the horse faster. He dismounted quickly, carried her to the porch, and shouldered the door open. The warmth of the fire inside hit them both, the orange glow cutting through the storm's gray light. He laid her gently in front of the hearth and fetched a blanket from the cot. She lay motionless, eyes closed, her lips trembling with each breath. Luke knelt, stoking the fire higher until it roared, then poured water from the kettle into a basin. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood, and when he reached out with a damp cloth, she flinched. "It's all right," he said softly. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you here." She opened her eyes then, looking at him with something between distrust and disbelief. "You don't even know who I am," she whispered. He wrung out the cloth and dabbed at the corner of her mouth where a cut bled faintly. "Don't need to," he replied. "You're hurt. That's all I need to know." Her lip trembled again, her voice small. "If you knew, you'd send me away." Luke met her gaze, his expression unmoving. "If I did that, I wouldn't be worth much as a man." She stared at him for a long time, as though trying to understand why a stranger would bother. Then her shoulders sagged, her body relaxing into the blanket. The sound of the rain softened against the roof, the fire crackled, and her breathing steadied. For the first time, color began to return to her cheeks. Luke sat nearby, silent, the weight of the moment pressing on him. He didn't know what had happened to her or who had done it, but as she whispered once more, "I'm ruined," something inside him twisted. He turned toward the window where the storm was fading into gray light. Jaw set. Whatever had broken this woman, he thought grimly, wasn't finished being answered for. By dawn, the storm had broken, leaving the world washed and still. The sun climbed slowly over the hills, painting the wet fields gold. Luke Callahan stood by the stove, pouring 2 cups of coffee, his eyes drawn again and again toward the figure lying beneath the blanket near the fire. The woman hadn't stirred much through the night, but she was breathing steady now, her color stronger. He'd heard her murmur a few words in her sleep, though they made little sense, bits of names, flashes of terror. Whatever had happened before he found her had carved deep into her soul. He crossed the room quietly, setting one cup beside her on the small wooden table. The smell of coffee filled the cabin. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the light filtering through the window. For a moment she looked lost, as though she didn't remember where she was. When she saw Luke, she tensed, pulling the blanket tighter around her. "Morning," he said softly. "You're safe. Storm's gone." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved to the steaming cup, then back to him. "Why did you bring me here?" He took a slow sip from his cup before answering. "'Cause leaving you out there would have been murder." Her lips pressed together. "You shouldn't have bothered." He leaned against the table, studying her. "I reckon that's not for you to decide." "You're alive." "That's a start." She looked down at her bandaged wrists, tracing the lines of the linen with trembling fingers. "Alive," she repeated quietly, as though the word tasted bitter. "That's not always a blessing." Luke's chest tightened. He'd seen that look before, years ago after the war, when good men came home broken and empty. He knew the kind of ghost that spoke through her voice. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered softly, "Clara." He nodded. "You from around here, Clara?" Her eyes flickered toward the window, to the endless plains beyond. "No, I came up from Laramie. Thought I'd find work at one of the ranches. Thought maybe." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter." "I was wrong." Luke waited. The fire popped. Outside, a few sparrows called across the fence line. "They said I stole from them," she continued, voice trembling. "The foreman and his men. But I didn't. I only took what I was owed. When I tried to leave, they caught me. Said I'd learn what happens to women who don't obey." Her hands clenched in her lap. "They tied me up. Left me there for the storm to finish." Luke's jaw tightened until it hurt. "You tell me which ranch." Her head snapped up. "What would you do? Get yourself killed?" "Don't matter," he said flatly. "Men like that don't deserve the sun on their backs." Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she shook her head. "No, I just want to forget. I don't want trouble." He crouched beside her, meeting her gaze. "Forgetting won't heal you. But you don't have to be afraid here." She studied him for a long moment. There was something steady in his eyes, something that didn't waver or pry. For the first time, her breath didn't catch when he spoke. He rose again and walked to the door, opening it to the morning light. The wind carried the scent of wet grass and pine. "You can stay here till you're ready to move on," he said over his shoulder. "No one will come looking." "Not unless you want them found." Clara watched him for a while, then turned her gaze to the fire. The warmth felt different now, gentle, not suffocating. When he came back to stoke it, she spoke quietly. "When you untied me last night." "You froze. Why?" Luke's hand paused on the poker. He looked into the flames, remembering that moment, the cold rain, the ropes falling away, the bruises, and the hollow fear in her eyes. "Because I realized something," he said finally. "Those ropes weren't just on your wrists. They were around your heart, too. And I knew I couldn't just cut one without helping you let go of the other." She blinked, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "No one's ever talked to me like that." He smiled faintly, not turning from the fire. "Then they were fools." The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. She reached for the coffee cup, her hands still unsteady but her grip firmer this time. The heat seeped into her fingers, chasing away the last chill of the storm. Outside, sunlight spilled across the prairie, touching the wet grass like gold thread. Luke moved to the window, watching the sky clear. Clara sat in the quiet, her mind still full of the past, but for the first time, the pain didn't own her completely. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft but sure. "I'm not ruined, am I?" He turned to face her, shaking his head. "No, ma'am. You're just not finished yet." And for the first time since he'd found her, Clara smiled, a small, fragile thing, but it was real, and it stayed.